This is the Good Contractor Podcast. We're back for episode 3. It's kind of like television. In a way, it's like, oh, they didn't cancel us. You know, like when you're running a pilot episode and things start and they're like, oh, we get to do like a whole season. We did good.
So I didn't cancel myself. John.
We have to ask the CEO of CompanyCam if it's worthy of canceling the podcast that he's on. These are the kind of leadership decisions that we task Luke with on a daily basis.
Just be there at 11. That's what I heard.
That is Luke Hansen. He is the CEO of CompanyCam. I'm John Talman, a content creator at CompanyCam. It's the Good Contractor Podcast, episode 3. And today, really super excited. Got to meet this guy out in Las Vegas at a trade show, and it was just phenomenal. And obviously he has a huge following, so I don't know, I need to do a huge introduction, but Desmond Tse is going to be joining us, otherwise known as the Siding Guy on Instagram. So I'm excited to talk with him. I know Luke's got questions. Without further ado, let's welcome in our guest. It is Desmond Tse. It is the Siding Guy. It is episode 3 of the Good Contractor Podcast. Desmond, how are you, sir? How's the snow in Edmonton?
We got some fresh snowfall overnight, but it'll be all gone in a few days. Spring is hopefully really here.
It sounds very much like Nebraska. It's like we'll get early fake spring, and then, you know, it's like, oh, it's here, and then it'll snow, and then it'll melt, and then it'll tease us again. So
then you forget to bring your coat to work, and then you freeze. That's what happened to me yesterday. Yes. You get it in your head that it's going to be, well, hold on. Desmond, are we doing Celsius or Fahrenheit?
I'm a Celsius guy, but I do know our freezing is your 32 and our minus 40s are the same.
Okay, that's a start. I'm going to flex some Celsius. You think it's going to be, 17 degrees out, but then you walk outside and it's -2 Celsius, and you realize you've made a serious mistake when you can no longer operate your hands after a few minutes. I think that translates to like, you think it's going to be 60 and then it's like 25 degrees, because that's what happened to me yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're in Canada, so we don't need coats, and we're still warm.
Yeah, just pure toughness and mental fortitude. Yeah, I've seen it. Well, hey, welcome to the show.
Thank you,
Desmond. We're glad you're here, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is super exciting. And there's so much I want to get to, including your journey to becoming the Siding Guy and early retirement from actually doing the contracting work, which is amazing in itself. But tell me the very beginning. Let's start there. How did you get into contracting? How did you get into siding? Kind of talk about, how you grew up, and then fast forward, how it got you to this point in terms of a career.
Well, unlike most contractors, I did not grow up in a handy home. I didn't even own a hammer until after I got married. So my wife had a toolbox full of tools before I did. And and I went to school, I got a degree, and then I decided to take a break from my area, which is, it might surprise many, but I was a pastor for a few years. And then I had done that for most of, my internships were in my teenage years, was all due or in that area of ministry. And I decided to take a break. And of course, we had to support our mortgage, which was only $400 a month or $420 a month. So times have changed. Back then, houses were cheap and we could live on minimum wage jobs and still do well. But then a friend of mine said, "Hey, you need work. My sister has a rental property. Let's fix it up, and she'll pay us $15 an hour." And so that was kind of my first experience in contracting, where he kind of knew what he was doing and I was just his helper. So we, I think took a bathtub out, took a toilet out, and redid a bathroom. And that was my first contracting gig. And then his sister said, "You guys did a really good job. You want to side the front of my rental house?" And so we said, "We can figure this out." So we went to Home Depot, got a pamphlet, read the instructions, and we did the front of the rental house with a 2-foot wraparound. And that's how I got into siding.
It sounds like you didn't have a plan.
No.
You were in ministry and you thought, okay, I think I want to not maybe be doing you can tell more of that story or just, I want to be out. But you'd left, let's say, your job without a plan, in a sense. Okay, I'm going to stop.
I had planned on going back, but it just never happened. And I found later in life, even until now, that I enjoy it much more doing it voluntarily than a paid position. So that I'm still continuing to use my education and doing it, but it's much better doing it without getting paid.
Sounds like an interesting story all on its own. So my dad, who started our family roofing company, which led to CompanyCam, this was, I think he started it the year I was born, 1984. But he was going to be he wanted to be a coach. I think he studied like sports science and physical training or something. But then he went to some seminary. He got out, and this was in the 80s, and it was a similar thing. It was like, okay, I don't have a job right now. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do, but he had more of a history of, he kind of grew up on a farm. So just like working with things, fixing things, he knew something. So he started fixing up properties, and then that turned into roofing, which turned into the career. But it's interesting, at least an interesting parallel. You know how to work, or just being committed to doing good work feels like the only prerequisite to being successful. Like, you'll learn a lot of other things along the way. And I think that leads to my next question, which is, you didn't know anything. So you start, and I'm just going to assume, based on the fact that I've watched 47,000, no, not that many, enough of your Instagrams, that you went in with like a kind of a good attitude, a commitment to doing good work. What was it like learning the work itself? And then how did that turn into specializing in siding?
Well, of course, after that first job with siding the front of the rental house, my friend and I, we applied in the classified ads for siding jobs as a joke because we thought it paid $65 per square foot. Little did we know it was $65 a square. We didn't know what a square was. And so
per 100 square feet. Yeah. Only off by 2 orders of magnitude.
Yeah. And
so you weren't as rich as you thought you were going to be.
And so we applied for it, and my friend was trying to explain to me, he pulls up plans on Google. I don't know if Google existed then. Yeah, it did, I think. But he's pointing at the rake, and he's saying, that's a gable. And then he points again and says, that's fascia. And I'm like, you just told me it was a gable. So I did not know roofing terms. I did not know building terms.
Yeah.
And he just said, when we go for an interview, you just shut up, Des, and I'll do the talking. And so we kind of faked it till we made it. And the guy hired us. He asked what equipment we had, and we only had a 20-foot homeowner grade type 3 ladder, I think. And it was a townhouse complex, 2-story, 12 pitch, and probably one of my most difficult jobs to date. But he said, if you can make it look like $1 million, then go for it. And so I was set against doing it, but he's like, oh, we could figure it out. And then it came down to a yard sale. We said, okay, next yard sale we stop at, if we see a ladder rack that'll fit on one of our vehicles, we're in. If not, done. So we kind of left it to the next yard sale we stopped at. And we saw yard sale sign pulled in, and the guy's like, oh, what are you looking for? I'm looking for a rack to fit that car for a ladder. Sorry, don't have anything. We're walking back to our car, and he flags us down saying, I think I have something in my attic. So he climbs up in his garage attic and pulls out this rack and says, you can have it for $10 and take a soda each, take a Coke each with you. And so that's kind of how set the trajectory of my life.
A ladder rack and Coke. Yeah, that's really what you need to get started. I love that. It's really fitting that you sort of left it up to Providence, that if it's right, then it'll manifest right here. If it isn't, then we'll figure it out. And so you started siding that's What a cool story.
And so
That's a similar that's a similar way I started CompanyCam. I just flipped a coin. I was like, if it's heads, I'm going to join Luke on this journey. But if it's tails,
it was a two-sided coin. He wanted to be here, despite what he says. Yeah. So, how long did you work for this guy? Like, what was it? You did the work. Let's say you managed to. It sounds like to side this kind of cut up. Was an apartment complex or something that was not straightforward. Did you was this pre-YouTube? Like how did you kind of figure it out as you went?
There was so it was multiple townhouse units, so each crew was in charge of their own fourplex. And so there were many crews that we could just look at their work, ask questions, and even the tar paper, we didn't have tools. So I used an upholstery stapler by hand to put this tar paper up. And then we hired, it was summertime, so we hired kids to tear down ahead of us while we figured out how to put the siding on. And of course we didn't have equipment. So one other crew ripped us off and charged us something like $1,500 to use their scaffolding poles for the weekend. So we worked the weekend so that we could do the gable ends and reach, because our 20-foot ladder didn't reach high enough. So we figured it out, and my friend lasted only till midsummer. We got that project done, and we were one of the only crews to make the time bonus, which made it 80 cents a square foot instead of 65, because we made a time bonus. And then, and so we realized that most of the crews showed up at noon and we showed up at 7. And so that's how we got a lot done. And that's how we made the time bonus. And then my friend said, I can't do that. I don't like heights. And so I just kept doing it on my own. So I worked for that company for a few months, and then another company headhunted me saying, hey, looks like you're going pretty quickly, doing pretty good work. Why don't you sign on with us, and we'll offer you a all-inclusive trip to Mexico if you stick with us for 6 months. So I'm like, heck yeah, Mexico. And
there's something very Canadian. I mean, going to Mexico, I've spent a decent amount of time in like Central America and Mexico. And, no one wants to be in Canada or in Ottawa in January. I discovered. Everyone wants to be out, and especially in construction. I met a lot of construction people who were, it's like, there's just nothing. We're not siding houses. We're not roofing houses. We're not doing anything in the winter. And that's a clever sign-on, I don't know, plan. Did you stick around there? Did you, that next company you signed on,
so
did you stay there for a long time?
That company had financial trouble within 4 months. So their partnership sort of, butted heads, and their bank accounts got frozen. And so then the one guy of the partners, he said, I'm going to stick to my word. So we ended up getting a trip to Vancouver, because we didn't do the full trip 6 months, but he wanted to compensate us for what I did. And then since their bank accounts were frozen, the builder knew I was doing all their houses anyway. So he's like, you're doing our houses anyway. So basically overnight I started a corporation and got my insurance and kept working for the same builder, except skipped the middleman. And that's kind of how I was really thrown into it.
So you incorporated overnight. Here you are, you're starting a business. Were you on this same fast path, or what were the first, again, Luke hears me ask this all the time. I'm fascinated by when people start their own business, what the first couple months are like, the first year is like, the first couple years, because I think that initial building process is just as fascinating as when you get to medium size or whatever you would call large size. So what were those first couple months like, first year like?
Well, in hindsight, I might have done stuff differently because I still was lacking in equipment. I would save up every job I did. I would put 100 or 200 aside and buy a piece of equipment. And in hindsight, working off ladders isn't very efficient, but I couldn't afford, the multiple thousands of dollars of pole scaffolding. And so, but I managed to do it all debt free, right? I worked out of a rust bucket of a truck and bought trucks at auctions. But within probably about 5 years, I was running 10 crews. I started hiring guys and training guys how I wanted it done, because I knew there was work out there. I cold called builders and said, give me a shot. I'll do it for this price, maybe slightly below market value. And if you like my work, let's talk more. And that's how I kind of build up the crew. And instead of hiring experienced guys, I would hire young guys from, and get their friends and friends of friends and basically almost dangle a carrot in front of them saying, I make this much. You have the potential to make this much because this isn't hourly work. I will pay you by piecework as long as you give me the quality I want and do it my way. And so I had a lot of young guys that I could train and then I'd set them up with trucks and trailers.
One of the hardest things is to go from doing the work to then kind of like running the company, like hiring people, training people. I'm curious, like, having a ministry background, that's very people oriented. Like, did you feel like you were sort of prepared for that, for managing the people, for being a leader? Like, did you see a tie in there into that growing and not being you, stapling with I forget what you called it, but, kind of like a hobby stapler, going from that, and then in short order, you're running 10 crews. Like, why do you think you were able to do that where a lot of people struggle?
I basically thought of all of them, what would I want if I was in their shoes, right? Like, I'd want to be taught this. I'd want help here because I can't afford a trailer. So I'd offer them, hey, I will finance you a trailer, and every check you just pay me back interest free, and that's kind of a benefit for being loyal to me and contracting under me. And so I thought in their shoes, and I thought, this is the stuff I hate doing in siding. So I'm going to offer bonuses for those, like Dutch gables or bump outs in houses. Instead of just straight square footage, I'd offer bonuses like $50 extra for every chimney you do. And so that sort of kept them interested and happy, because I know, that the things that make you unhappy on the job.
Were you selling these jobs, or were you still getting the jobs from another source, or how were you getting enough jobs to be able to run 10 crews?
I just go directly to builders. So new home builders, they typically, let's say a builder does 400 homes a year. They might use 4 different siding companies. And so I would be one of them. And eventually, as I grew, they would, since they liked me, I might be more expensive, but they give me more and more work. And so I can just feed them more and more crews.
Why did they like you?
I said I did what I said I was going to do. So in the 20 years I've been doing this, I've never missed a deadline. Never.
Wow.
Yeah. And so
that's impressive.
Yeah, that's impressive.
And so, and I would also charge them if they missed my deadline, saying, you said the house is going to be ready on this date. It is now 5 days later. I'm paying my guys to sit. So I'd invoice them for that, and they'd be okay with that because it goes 2 ways, right? You expect me to be on time. I expect you to be on time.
Again, I'm fascinated by my previous stops managing people just like Luke is. So like the whole building a business and leadership thing is fascinating to me. Did you come up with that system right there because I know you said it was kind of an overnight incorporation. How quickly did you lay out the plan of, I'm going to run a business. I'm going to, as I expand, I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to make sure that, is it a little bit of kind of both, and that you learn as you go, figure it out as you kind of walk around the minefield that is, different situations, or how did you kind of outline that? Because that's really smart to say, I'm going to cover myself both ways and it should work both ways. Like all those steps of running a business, talk about like forming that.
To be honest, I had zero plans. Everything's in here, even my calendar, it's in here. If you look at my calendar, it's blank. I kind of have it all up here. I know, okay, on Thursday I'm doing this. And so even with every single business I've run, it's all kind of fly by the seat of my pants and go with the flow. And if this doesn't work, hey, let's try this, and if this doesn't work, let's pivot and try this, or even chatting with the guys. Hey, what do you think of this bonus? Would you rather this or this? And if we can get a mutually beneficial relationship, then both parties are happy, right?
It's really smart, but more just like very practical. And it seems like very people oriented, like just understanding what motivates them, and the best way to do that, like you said, was what would I want?
Yeah. Well,
what would have helped me?
And I even had one young guy, I said, I do not want you running from your taxes. Being a contractor, you're getting this lump sum of money. I'm paying you a lump sum every single job. You need to be putting 30, 40% aside for when tax time comes and you got to submit your tax. So one guy was, he wasn't sure if he'd be able to do it. So I set up a trust account and said, look, I'll hold back 30% of every job you do, so that, and when you do your taxes, I'll give you that lump sum and it's going to be your own mini tax return. And it really helped him out, because that's what I see in a lot of trades. They live paycheck to paycheck, and then they're always in the hole, and they get deeper and deeper in the hole with the government.
I was just going to say, I have a large background of managing a large amount of people. Luke has managing even more people than I am currently at CompanyCam. But I think what's so interesting, I just wanted to stay on this for just a moment. When I was overseeing 40 people and 100 partners, or 250 employees like Luke is, I think, or you have 10 crews, Desmond does. We're just so worried about the forward momentum and trajectory of the organization, thinking that's what takes care of the people that are behind it, versus going in reverse, which is the individual people and what they would want, or the same things you would want, and that pushes it forward. So I just wanted to stay on that, because I thought that's a really good point that you bring up. And as people that have leadership experience or managing large groups, it is easy not to look at it from the standpoint of, oh, what would I want? If I was in this position at this level, I'd been at this company for X amount of years, what would I expect? What would I want? What are some benefits that I would want? What are things that I wouldn't like? And that's really, I just thought that was a really cool thing. I just didn't want to lose that, because that's something I certainly could think about more too. So that's awesome. Sorry to interrupt. Luke, fire away.
You made me forget my point, John.
Well, see, now I got
number 74. That's how I know you as an employee here. Number 7. No.
See, it's Luke's leadership that just, when I fill out
74, that was a lie. It's more like 211.
Yeah.
Let's face it.
I think I was close to number 100. But anyway.
Were you?
I think so.
Okay.
This is wild.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
No, okay, I saw this from my dad running his business, in that, and I tell people this because it's easy to think if you're not in contracting, that like doing the work is kind of the hardest part, or that getting the next job is the hardest part. And it's not that those are so easy, but managing the people is the hard part, and especially managing people who don't have experience managing themselves. Mm-hmm. That haven't done their taxes or don't have as good of a plan. And I know that when that there's kind of it's leadership and management, but it's almost like being a guide, or mm-hmm. Fulfilling this role for people to help them kind of be I'm going to say better than they are, which I don't mean that exactly in a moral sense, but kind of like in the process of growing up. Like that's kind of what I'm feeling like, that you're talking about finding like young guys, they don't have a lot of experience. They've never done their taxes. They don't own the equipment, like, similar spot, let's say roughly to where you are. How much of that just helping people grow up? Like, does this analogy ring true to you, or how do you look at that when you think of it beyond just, hey, I'm in a business trying to make money, but the idea of like, I'm influencing these people's lives, like what? I'm just interested to hear you talk.
It's pretty neat to see that one person can make a small difference in another person's lives. Like, I always told them, I don't expect you to work for me forever. I only ask them to promise me 1 year if I am to finance them interest-free for their trailer or equipment, or help them out with that. All I asked was a year. But before, because I had lots of people wanting to work for me, but I said, you have to come to me with a truck or a trailer first to show me that you have gumption or the grit to get trained. And then, but now looking at it, there are, I think at least 3 people I know that are running their own siding businesses now that I trained, and they're bigger. I'm solo now, so they're bigger than I, and they're supporting multiple families and mortgage, and they're employing people. And, that's kind of like, hey, I birthed that. I remember this one guy, he was a great gutter installer, and I just kept running to him on job sites, and I just said, come side, I will teach you. And I think you'll be able to make a better living. And he is the one guy that was a dedicated hourly employee to that gutter company for years and years and years. And he finally made the switch, and now he's running his own business with multiple employees. It's exciting.
That's awesome. I mean, it is meaningful, and it is a way, there's conversations about college or university. Is it worth the money? Is it these, like, the way that you get into a career, that this is a way to work into a career that almost anyone with, let's say, the right attitude, I almost limit to that, because I think it sounds to me that's how you started it. Like, you had the right attitude. You didn't have a ladder. You didn't have maybe you at that point owned a hammer due to your marriage. But, just having that right attitude, you can work your way into a career. But so you built this business. You were running, a number of crews. When did you start kind of like posting on social media, or like when did you turn it into, not that it was turning it into anything, but kind of like what was that like? Because I imagine you didn't maybe see the end of where you are now, talking to me and John, about this. But like, how did you kind of get into that, telling a little bit of the story? Like, I see you training, I see you showing off products, I see you, like, I learned how to install the inside corner of a J channel and how to cut the 45 properly from you this morning when I was watching Instagram. Like, when did that start, and what were you thinking at the time?
So I'll backtrack it to a decade ago, where my kids were at the age where I was like, I got to be present as a dad, and so I slowly, as crews went on to do different things, I never replaced them. And then it got to a point where, I ran 3 crews and was able to be on the job myself installing, because that's what I love. I didn't really enjoy running the 10 crews because I couldn't have a tool belt on. I was organizing, I was managing. And so then for a few years, 3 crews. And then as they went on to do different things, I just did it solo for the past decade, we'll call it. And mainly because I wanted to be that volunteer parent at the kids' school. We'd go on probably 2 to 3 vacations a year, and working solo, I didn't have to manage anything. If one builder said, Des, we don't see you on a job for a week, we probably figure you booked a last minute flight, somewhere on vacation, because they knew I liked traveling. So it was, so then I went solo, and I really enjoyed it. And it was probably 4 years and a month ago was my first Instagram post. And it was mainly because I'd been hunting for a tool belt. I'd run a cheap Home Depot tool belt for over a decade, the same one. And then I was like, well, stuff is falling out. And my friend said, hey, you should check out this tool belt company. And they only had stuff on Instagram. So then, of course, I had to go on Instagram, and then I ended up binge watching, much like yourself this morning, tool belt videos. Okay. And then so I bit the bullet and spent a few $100s on a custom tool belt. And then I knew someone that is partnered with that tool belt. He works in their website, and then he's like, hey, you should post a review for us, get it out there. And so I said, okay, I like this tool belt. And so that was my very first post. I think it was January 20 something, and 4 years ago. And
Okay.
Wow.
and so then he's like, oh, that was good. He's like, you should start posting tips and tricks. And I'm like, I don't have time for this. He's, and he's like, well, just post a couple of times a week and see. And then I guess it just kind of took off accidentally. Again, zero plan. I had no plan for anything. It just happened organically, and I just went with the flow, and I'm still going with the flow.
I got two things. Sorry, I got a lot of things. John, pipe down. Sorry, I like yelling at John. He yells at me, but
it's like a stress reliever for him. He just screams.
It is.
Yeah.
I need to do it. I was on some other podcast the other day, and I was telling someone that just documenting the process. That like you don't have to even be an expert, say you're an expert, do anything. That like you do know things because you're doing them every day. You're cutting a piece of J channel for the corner. You're cutting over. I saw you like it was installing over a piece over 2 doors and what looked to be maybe like a dryer vent, or I couldn't really tell what. Maybe it was a light fixture. And it's kind of like, okay, how do you do this? Like you're just kind of showing it, and this is how you do it. And that just seems to work and be compelling to people. It's very low ego. It's just like, hey, we're doing this. It's interesting, and you can learn from it. Or if you're already into it, you can just watch it. I just think that's such I say smart, not in that you were planning it, but in that you kind of stumbled into something authentic that just works because it is authentic and real, and you are out there doing siding. And all that is misdirection from my actual question, which was, we talk about growing your business here a lot. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, they want to grow. Hey, I can do more. How do I do more? How do I run more crews? How do I get more jobs? How do I manage this larger operation? Sometimes I think it's very thoughtful. You want to grow and do more work. Sometimes it's just natural, like, hey, just do more. You can just follow the path of doing more. And you made a conscious decision that, hey, I want to be more present with my family, and therefore that is what I'm going to orient towards. And then I'm going to fit the rest of my life and siding houses and my business around that. It would seem to me would have financial implications. That if you're doing 10 jobs, you're making more money than if you're doing one job yourself. How did you not exactly how did you think about that? Because I know you were focused on the family time, being able to do what you wanted. When you were growing versus when you decided not to grow, and the financials, like, was that easy? Was that hard? What was that like for your family?
Well, the financials wasn't that different. Yes, there's more profit in running multiple crews. There's also multiple times more headaches. But over the years, I think I developed a system for myself that I could do it so efficiently that the margins doing it myself was very high. Like, think about it. There's a few houses in my story highlights on Instagram where their houses are done in 3 days, 2-story houses, where many 2 to 3 man crews would take a week and a half to 2 weeks to do that. So you think 2 weeks of work split between 3 guys, one guy's getting it all, right? So that the reality is I only needed to side 2 or 3 houses a year, but instead I did 20 to 30, right? Solo. So
you're the 10X siding guy. There's a joke in technology about the 10X engineer, the person that can just do so much more, write so much more code than the regular engineer. And it sounds like but you become the difference between being an expert and being just, I don't know, a laborer or just someone who's really doesn't think of it as like their craft, that like they're really trying to be efficient here. Like, did you invent all of that? I say invent, like obviously you get better and better and better, but how much of let's say the methods or what allows you to do it that much faster?
Well,
did you kind of come up with, or did you learn from people?
Working alone, you just figure out the laziest way to get the end result that doesn't sacrifice quality. So you're thinking most guys would send a laborer back and forth, getting it. Well, why don't I have everything here at the same time? So constantly I'm just trying to be lazy is how it really is. And if I can get something done in so much less time and get the same amount of profit, then that's where I can save a lot of money, because making more money didn't mean I spent more. Our family lived on our same old budget all these years, and that's what allowed me to semi get out. Or like now I take jobs if I want. I do it for enjoyment, not because I have to.
So tell me, I had to bring this up, and I wanted to say this on the podcast because when I met you at AHR in Las Vegas, we were talking about products, and we were talking about, being on this podcast and stuff like that. And one of the interesting things that you said to me, Luke said the word authentic, and that's a great way to put it. But I remember you were talking about, because you're not in it running crews or running the business anymore, you're doing it for enjoyment. You said, I'm not going to review a product on my channel that I wouldn't use if I was back in the business, or that I'm not using now. Essentially, what Desmond was saying to me was, I'm not going to do something that is not authentic and real and 1,000% true just to sell a product, take some money, do a post about it. It has to be real from A to Z when you're behind it. Why have you, because look, social media, there is a ton of stuff. It's like, oh, I can pose as a blank and then it looks like I'm this, but you really aren't doing that, or you really aren't using that product. You were just paid to sell it, essentially, but you won't do that. Why is that so important for you?
Well, it's my integrity, right? Like, I had a company reach out and, I'll pay you lots of money. Just send us a video of you using this hammer. And I said no, because even if I did not have to post it on my own social media channel, if they use that footage and someone else saw it, they'd know Des would never swing that hammer. He only swings titanium, So, there goes my integrity, right? And even, let's say CompanyCam, you guys reached out to me, I think, over and over and over again for probably a year. And I said, no, right? And then I said, well, Why don't I see what your product is about at the show? And if it would be beneficial for my audience, then I can present it to them that way. That you guys saw my video. It is meant not for me as a solo employee. It's designed for 3 or more people in a business, right? Just lay it out there truthfully and honestly, right? And no one wants to be known as a sellout, right? And in the social media world, that's what people think, oh, that guy's just selling out, right?
Well, you're honing in. We talk about building trust. The idea that this is what seems like you've done every step of the way. Like the builders trusted you, your people trusted you, and that I'm sort of leading into answering my own question about being a good contractor, but that maintaining that trust, whether it's with your business relationships, with your just people that are swiping through Instagram like me, seeing these videos, that the way that you operate, your integrity, you're not going to compromise that trust. And it sounds like that you're living that and not just sort of speaking it, which is why, that's why people are going to watch. Like, you're not going to watch reviews from people who, or take advice from people that are really just going to the highest bidder. If you know it, if you don't know it, and that's how it probably works, is that you don't know it. Like, I don't know what XYZ person actually uses for a hammer. Like, I wouldn't have known, considering you operated with that old tool belt, that you only swing titanium hammers. That sounds kind of fancy. And I kind of actually want to hear about titanium hammers, but I'm going to stop myself because it's not a titanium hammer podcast.
No, it is not.
The idea of trust and the idea of, let's say, this is the Good Contractor Podcast. When you started all the way through, you've been the solo person, you've ran crews. What do you think makes a good contractor? My whole leading question aside, what is a good contractor?
I touched on it before. Do what you say you're going to do. Just stick to your word. That's if you're going to be late, tell them. Don't make excuses. Just saying, hey, this is on me, and I'm going to be 3 days late, and I'd rather let 2 weeks ahead of time than make up an excuse when you don't show up on that day, right? Just sort of give people what you would want. Like if, like, I don't know if you've chased people for money before. I've had to chase my fair share of clients, and I'd rather the builder say, hey, I cannot pay you for 65 days instead of saying, I'll get you a check tomorrow. Oh, I'll get you a check. They give you a check. Oh, don't cash it. It's going to bounce. I've had my share of those. Like, just tell me 65 days and I'll tell you if I can live with that or not, or we work out a different solution.
And then to follow up Luke's question, we always ask, what is a good contractor? But do you think anyone can be a contractor if they wanted to be, whether they were young or not, and they're starting out or not? But do you think anyone, if they wanted to be in a trade, regardless of what trade that might be, do you think anyone can be a contractor?
Well, Luke was saying, anyone was sort of, what did you say earlier? You said if you're willing and eager.
Yeah, I think I said something about attitude.
Okay.
That
So
that
sparked a thought in my mind when you said something about attitude. I was like, well, common sense, I think, is one of those where you can't teach. So I don't think anyone could be a contractor, but you have to have some common sense.
Well, the joke in roofing and in siding, it applies equally, is that water runs downhill. And if you don't know that and you can't incorporate that into your thinking about installing siding, then you're going to be sunk. But that, I don't know. When you say common sense, how closely do you equate that to just like, I don't know, intelligence generally? Like what have you seen, without naming names, we don't need to really shame anyone here, but like, what have you seen in terms of like, okay, this person might have the right attitude, but they're just lacking the common sense? Like what were the things that
I can't even think of a person or a name, but I know there are tons of intelligent people out there that are way smarter than me, but don't necessarily have a lot of common sense. I don't know if that resonates. Like it's that common sense piece, I don't think can really be thought, because these smart people are logical. They're smart. They can do equations I can't do, but certain regular things that would be common sense to most might not resonate with them. I don't know if that makes
No, that makes sense.
No, I've worked with people. I work with John, actually, so I'm pretty familiar with this situation. No, sorry, John just happens to be here. I do this to everyone at CompanyCam, and they do it to me. John is unfortunate enough to have an expensive mic in his face.
Yeah, he does it to me more often. All right, Desmond, we have to. I have to ask Luke the ultimate question, since he brought it up on the first episode, and we did not do this with our first guest, Ashley Smith, but we are going to do it with you, Luke. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Should we vote Desmond out of? We can't vote him out of contracting because he's technically only doing this for pure enjoyment. But are you going to give him the thumbs up for someone to be a voice in the contracting space? Maybe we'll say,
I mean, I got two thumbs up. I can't. The idea that I would even be able, like, be remotely qualified to have an opinion about Desmond as a good contractor is I think insulting to him, because I think he's a great contractor. I mean, I don't know. I'm really impressed with what you've done over there. I think I love what you're doing just in general on the stuff that I see. Like, I love that you post it, because it's at least it seems to me that you're not out to make a name for yourself. You're not that you are. I was going to say stumbling. It's not that you're stumbling, but you're sort of just like open to following the paths that present themselves to you, and you're going to do it in a certain way, which is I'll say your way, like based on your character, your integrity, and how you're going to operate your life. And that it seems like that keeps working, and then now we get to see it. Like, we get to learn about siding, we get to learn about some of these products, and I think it's really cool, and I'm impressed with what you're doing. If you ever find yourself around here, just come by and hang out at our office and teach some of these people your ways.
I'd like to. I like traveling.
I don't know that.
I like traveling, so I kept saying to my wife, we got to write down all the cities that, of companies I work with, like yourself, and then we're able to write off a trip, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, and
Absolutely.
financially planning.
Desmond, I can't thank you enough. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us on the Good Contractor Podcast. I'm such a huge fan of yours, and like Luke said, what you're doing, and we'll have to do this again. Future episode with Desmond for sure.
Sounds good. Or a collaboration in Lincoln, Nebraska.
We'll go both ways. You can come down and see us. We'll go see you.
Yeah.
We'll do.
Yeah.